And then I went back to this text and realized, oh, that is a really fleshy thing to do. Let's not do that. A very wise friend of mine commented that something we don't hear as often in chapel model is sermons we actually preach in the congregations we serve. We preach sermons by theologians to theologians. So I'm actually going to preach the sermon I preached on this text this weekend at First Lutheran Church in Logan Square. So a couple of quick words about that congregation. It's an originally Anglo congregation that is now formally bilingual. And that's because they have a very robust homeless ministry that includes a lot of Spanish-speaking people. So it's mostly lower income, homeless and near homeless folks that this sermon was written for. Some English speakers and some Spanish speakers. So bearing that in mind, I hope this will also be a good word for those of us gathered here today. So, good morning.
Good morning.
I am genuinely delighted to be here today. After I had to cancel last week, I didn't think I was going to get a chance to preach in chapel, so I'm really glad that this worked out. I'm sorry you were going to hear this about it, but this is really exciting for me. Many of you know that for the last several weeks now, I've been struggling with some ongoing health issues. I've had an infection in my leg that has been hard to fight off, but thankfully my body is finally winning that microscopic war. So. And I've been deeply grateful for your words of support and your prayers during this time. It's been really hard to be cooped up for most of the last month. I've had to miss classes and opportunities to preach, and I miss getting to see friends and, well, other people. My cat's good company, but it's just not the same. At times, it's almost felt like my whole life has been shrunk down to this experience of illness and anxiety and isolation. I felt like this experience of illness invading my flesh has become the whole of who I am. So that's actually one reason our text today really grabbed my attention. Paul tells the Corinthians that they are getting too caught up in the things of the flesh. He reminds them in this passage that they are more than just flesh. They are the field in which God has sown the word of life. They are the building which God has built, a holy temple, the dwelling place of God. God has created them to be people of flesh and spirit. I needed this reminder too, that I am both flesh and spirit. After spending so much time at home, stuck, trying to get better, feeling weighed down by the limitations of my flesh, I needed to be reminded of the fullness of who I am. Buenos días.
Buenos días.
Es un gran placer estar aquí con ustedes. Después de cancelar la semana pasada, no pensaba que tendría chance de estar aquí con ustedes. Algunos de ustedes saben que he sufrido con una infección de la pierna durante las semanas pasadas. Y ya gracias a Dios me estoy sanando y doy gracias por sus oraciones y su apoyo. Ha sido difícil estar encerrada todo este tiempo durante el mes pasado para sanarme. He faltado en clases y en la iglesia, y me ha hecho falta ver a otros amigos y a otra gente. Por un rato mi vida se redujo a la enfermedad y la ansiedad y el aislamiento. La experiencia de la enfermedad invadiendo mi carne consumía todo mi ser. Por lo tanto, me llamó la atención la segunda lectura de la carta de Pablo a los Corintios. Pablo les dice a los Corintios que se preocupan demasiado por las cosas carnales. En este texto les recuerda que son algo más que solamente carne. Son el campo en que Dios ha sembrado la palabra de la vida. Son el edificio que Dios ha construido, un templo sagrado, la mera morada de Dios. Dios nos ha creado como gente de carne y también de espíritu. Yo también necesitaba ese recuerdo de que soy carne y también espíritu. Después de pasar tanto course, was a very diverse and very wealthy place, situated right in the middle of several major trade routes. And the Christian community there reflected this diversity. There were Jews and Gentiles, Romans and Greeks, and who knows who else, a whole bunch of different people. And there were some people wealthy enough to own their own homes, but a large part of their group was made up of the poor, of working people and women, and of course, many slaves. All these different people had very different opinions about how to interpret the things that Paul and the other apostles had taught them. Of course, we don't know anything about that. We all agree. But Paul calls them out for fighting with one another, and for being jealous of one another, and for bragging about who baptized whom. Instead of building each other up and focusing on their unity in the Spirit, the Corinthians were letting their divisions and disagreements tear them apart. Sound familiar? Mm-hmm. So it's hard not to see our community, our country, and our world reflected in that situation. We too are divided by quarreling and jealousy and boasting. We're divided by the kind of competitiveness that made coming up with a sermon for this service so needlessly difficult for me. And we're divided by even uglier things, like racism and xenophobia, by misunderstandings and hostility between urban people and rural people, by sexism and greed, and above all, by fear. There is a level of prejudice and distrust and division in our society that affects all of us, no matter what side of the issues we may stand on. These things are like a disease infecting the body of Christ, every bit as real as the infection I've been battling. This sickness, and it is a sickness, makes us focus on the fleeting things of this world and forget that we are vessels of the living and eternal Spirit of God. This sickness tears us apart and makes us forget who we are. Creo que estos versículos de la carta de Pablo a los Corintios son las buenas nuevas para nosotros hoy. Noto varias similitudes entre la comunidad de los Corintios y el mundo nuestro. La ciudad de Corinto era muy diversa y bien rica, ubicada en el medio de varias rutas comerciales. Y esa diversidad se reflejaba en la comunidad cristiana. Había judíos y gentiles, griegos, romanos y quién sabe qué más. Había personas ricas que tuvieran casas propias, pero una gran parte del grupo se formaba de gente pobre, trabajadores, mujeres y hasta esclavos. Estas varias personas interpretaban las enseñanzas de Pablo y los demás apóstoles de maneras muy diferentes. Pablo los regaña por pelear entre sí y por sus actitudes de celos y jactancia. En vez de apoyarse los unos a los otros y reconocer su unidad en el espíritu, los corintios permitían que sus desacuerdos y sus rencores los dividieran. Veo una reflexión de nuestra comunidad, nuestro país y nuestro mundo en esta situación. Igual nosotros somos divididos por peleas, celos y jactancias. Somos divididos por la competencia que me hizo tan difícil inventar un sermón para esta ocasión. Y hay cosas aún más feas que nos dividan. El racismo, xenofobia, el mal entendimiento y hostilidad entre los urbanos y los rurales. Y también el sexismo, el avaricio y sobre todo el miedo. Hay un nivel de prejuicio, desconfianza y división que existe en nuestra sociedad que nos afecta a todos sin importar nuestras creencias personales. Estas cosas son como una enfermedad que infecta el cuerpo de Cristo, tan real como la infección en el cuerpo mío. Esta enfermedad nos hace enfocarnos en las cosas fugaces de este mundo y olvidar que somos vasos del Espíritu vivo y eterno de Dios. destroys God's temple, God will destroy that one. For God's temple is holy, and you are that temple. You are that temple. All of you. All of us together are God's temple, the body of Christ. And we know very well what the things are that seek to destroy us, don't we? Prejudices based on race or gender or identity or background that dehumanize others. Skyrocketing economic inequality, politics that put power and party before people. Divisions abound. We are caught up in an entire system that seems determined to tear us down, to destroy this temple that God has built. But Paul's words on this matter are comforting and clear. If anyone destroys God's temple, God will destroy that one. We can rest assured that God will destroy these diseases, this sickness that tears us apart. God will heal our world. And God will make us whole. God will continue to build us up as the body of Christ, free from hatred and fear, make us holy, and equip us to participate in that work of healing. So I invite you to take Paul's words with you into this week and let them remind you of who you are and of who we all are together. You are God's temple, and God's Spirit dwells in you. God's temple is holy, and you are that temple. Pablo recordó a los Corintios de su verdadera identidad. Después del texto que nos toca hoy, Pablo sigue diciendo, ¿no saben que ustedes son el templo de Dios y que el Espíritu de Dios habita en ustedes? Si alguno destruye el templo de Dios, él mismo será destruido por Dios. Porque el templo de Dios es sagrado y ustedes son ese templo. Ustedes mismos son ese templo, toditos. Todos nosotros juntos somos el templo de Dios, el cuerpo de Cristo. Y sabemos bien cuáles son las cosas que nos quieren destruir: el prejuicio, el odio, la desigualdad económica y una política nacional que da más importancia al poder que a la gente. Los sistemas en que vivimos a veces parecen ser diseñados para dividirnos, para derribarnos y para destruir el templo que Dios construyó. Pero las palabras de Pablo nos alientan. Si alguno destruye el templo de Dios, él mismo será destruido por Dios. Podemos confiar en que Dios destruirá las enfermedades de odio y miedo que nos hacen sufrir y sanará nuestro mundo. Dios seguirá santificándonos y alentándonos como el cuerpo de Cristo. Así que les invito a llevar las palabras de Pablo consigo durante esta semana y dejar que les recuerden de quiénes son y de quiénes somos juntos. Son ustedes el templo de Dios. Y el Espíritu de Dios habita en ustedes. El templo de Dios es sagrado y ustedes